Nope.
Hello, dear listener. Thank you for joining me in this week's video. Since this Friday is Veterans Day, I thought it would be a great opportunity to dedicate a video to our veterans. It's no doubt that the brave men and women of our military have to face horrific things on a daily basis, but these stories will center around an otherworldly sort of terror. Since today is also Election Day here in the States, I figure no story will scare us more than anticipating our next president. So, while we're all still here and the country is not up in flames, I hope you enjoy these 8 paranormal military stories. Number 1. I deployed to Iraq, and for some of my deployment, we stayed in an old Mujahideen hideout that the US took in Sadir City. It was an old factory with 3 floors. The locals told us that the terrorists would snatch up targets and murder them on the 3rd floor. I guess it happened once or twice, and everyone seemed to have the same accounts. Well, that floor was scary as hell. No lights, but constant sounds of people moving and weird shit happening. It would always feel like something was watching you. I remember being up there alone once and distinctly hearing footsteps. Others had similar stories. People would sometimes stay up there with night vision goggles or thermal optics looking for shit. Sometimes you could see the thermal changes in the area and balls of light floating around. By the time we left, barely anyone went up there. You knew some bad shit happened in that place. Number 2. My great uncle served in the Navy during World War II. I'm not familiar with many military terms, but if I remember correctly, he was a mechanist mate and served on the USS Missouri. He told me that on several occasions they witnessed flying submarines that would shoot out of the water and then fly around buzzing before they took off into the night sky. He witnessed them taking off and on one occasion flying back down into the water. He told me at the time that no one thought they were alien UFOs. Everyone called them Foo Fighters and thought they were part of a secret Japanese attack force. He said that these encounters really hurt the crew's morale because the Foo Fighters were obviously far advanced beyond what the Allies had, and many crewmen thought they were going to die any day. But the attack never came. The superior officers actually ordered them to forget the incidents ever happened. The war ended in a year and my uncle was reassigned, with no further word about flying submarines or Foo Fighters. Number 3. My uncle was deployed in D-Day during World War II. He made it past the beaches and survived a few days but died soon after the invasion started. This was in the 1940s, so news didn't travel as quickly as it does today. That means weeks, sometimes months, would go by before families were notified of a death. Supposedly, on the day that my uncle died, my great-grandmother was sitting on the porch alone when my uncle, dressed in full military uniform, walked up the porch and sat down next to her. He said that he had just been killed during an invasion in France in a tank explosion. He explained that he hadn't suffered and that he was going to a better place. Understandably, my great-grandma started freaking out and ran into the house to tell everyone what had happened. Everyone told her to relax. After all, France was German-occupied, so how could he have died there? Flash forward a few weeks/months, and they received the notification that my uncle had died in a tank explosion in France on the day that he had come to comfort my great-grandma. Number 4. I was stationed at Camp Geiger during infantry school. I remember vividly pulling up to the camp and feeling very uneasy, even though it was a bright, sunny day. The whole place just oozed sadness. It was a very depressing place. Anyway, one night I was on watch. I forget what the position was called, but on every floor there were 2 guys on fire watch, and I was the equivalent of the corporal of the guard. Early morning, I want to say around 1 or 2 a.m., one of the guys on watch came running toward me as I made my rounds. He urged me to wake up the NCO on duty because someone was bleeding from his stomach and screaming for a corpsman. He was visibly shaken. As I continued down to the next floor, the same thing had been seen by the watch in that squad bay. I quickly made my way to my sergeant and woke him up, telling him what had happened. Groggily, he told me not to worry about it and to tell everyone else to relax. I was quite flustered, but went ahead and spread the word. I spent the rest of my shift outside, chain smoking in the light. Later, I had my sergeant, who had taught at ITB, tell me that the B Company barracks were notoriously haunted, but it was kind of unspoken. He relayed a story of waking up one night on duty with the door being hammered on. He yelled, "What do you want?" But there was no answer. The banging just continued. Growing angrier, he screamed, "What the hell do you want?" And again, it kept going. Finally, losing his patience, he ripped the door open and saw the duty watchman sitting across the hall. He roared, "Why the hell are you knocking?" Pale-faced and stammering, the watchman replied, "I thought you were knocking, Sergeant." He told me he immediately grabbed his cot after that and slept in the squad bay with the rest of the Marines that night. Number 5. I have 2 stories from my tour in Iraq from 2004 to 2005. First, we were on the guard tower very late at night. We, 2 per guard shift, were looking over an area that was nearly impossible for anyone to cross. We'd sleep for a few hours so we could be fresh for our route clearance patrols during the day or afternoon. There was a very long metal staircase that led to the back of the tower. If someone was coming up the stairs, you could hear them coming, and it would take a few minutes worth of clomping up the metal stairs to finally get up them. So if you didn't hear the loud truck pulling up, then the stairs would definitely get you going. Anyway, we were in the middle of a nap and we heard footsteps on the stairs. It was odd that we didn't hear the vehicle, but we compose ourselves and wait for whoever it is to walk up the stairs and through the door. Right about the time when someone should have been coming through the door, we turn to see if it is the NCO in charge, but no one comes through the door. I look to my buddy, get up, and go to the door. Just as I get to it, we hear footsteps rushing down the stairs, as if someone was running down them, but the sound then stopped, like someone stopped before they even got halfway. I opened the door and no one was there, not even a vehicle. I was concerned that we may have let someone slip through the wire, so I went down the stairs carefully to investigate. The tower was out in the middle of nowhere at the back of our FOB, so there was nowhere to hide. I looked under the tower and my buddy scanned with the infrared goggles, but nothing. That was when we realized something creepy was going on. The second story takes place after the Chow Hall bombing. I saw someone that I went to basic training with walking by as I was driving to bring the vehicle to the mechanic for service. I wondered what he was doing up there, but also wanted to get a quick picture of the damage to the outside of the Chow Hall. and when I turned back, he was gone. I later found he was killed in the blast. Number 6. In 2010, I was in Kyrgyzstan and was working MIDS, USAF security forces. I was on a Delta patrol, which was in charge of a 2-mile wide field overwatching our planes land and making sure none of them were going to get blown up or shot down. It was around 2 in the morning, and we got word on the radio that we had a plane coming in about 10 minutes. So we go to our spot, just me and my Alpha, in an old 4-door Nissan truck that was handed down to us from Iraq. Our spot was on the top of a hill in the middle of nowhere, near an old abandoned farm from who knows when. Well, to give you a mental picture, there is a small dirt road that leads up to the hill, surrounded by tall grass and wild marijuana plants. Once you get to the top of the hill, you're met with a dark barn that is falling apart. When I was at the top of the hill, I turned the vehicle around so that the barn was behind me and I could overlook the entire dark field. Once I was in position, I turned off the engine and the lights and only had the radio on to some Russian music playing. I pulled the handbrake and just sat back to realize that my Alpha had fallen asleep. I thought to myself, hey, not a bad idea. I might as well take a short 15-minute nap as well. So I turned the car stereo off and turned my handheld radio up. That's when I heard a faint, feminine scream coming from the bar. Keep in mind, we were the only people in a half-mile radius. It really creeped me out, and I stayed super silent to see if I heard it again. But nothing. So I played it off and decided it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I laid my seat back a little more and just started overlooking the field again, when all of a sudden the whole truck jerked violently as if it got rammed from behind by another vehicle. It was to the point where my Alpha woke up startled and yelling, "What the hell did you hit, dude?" This is when I replied, "Dude, nothing. Look at where we are. And the car is off. I didn't do shit." We got out of the truck and got our flashlights to start looking around, thinking maybe it was some kind of big animal that ran into us, or possibly the big mountain lion that was spotted in the area. We saw nothing, and no signs of anything being up there with us. We even took out our night vision goggles and thermals, but still saw nothing. This is when we decide to just get out of there. We go back to check up on the people at the other posts and tell them our experience. I told them about the scream I heard earlier, and there were a few guys who said they heard it too, and that it bugged them to the point where they did walk around the barn and saw nothing. They said there was no way of getting in the barn since everything was chained up, and the only way through was a few open windows on the top. To this day, none of us can explain how that sort of force was possible. Number 7. I was stationed in Panama in the early 90s. We were a supply unit, so when we went out to the field, we would recon for built-up areas that we could use. There are quite a few abandoned buildings in the jungle near the canal. I assume they were used during the actual building of the canal and then simply abandoned as construction moved or was completed. Usually, setting up in an abandoned building was a mixed blessing. Bats and other animals liked the buildings too, but you also found concrete foundations nearby. They were most likely used for tenting or even parking, which we could use in the same way. One particular time, we drove out to a location on the map that was supposed to have several buildings. It was always a bit weird to be driving through the jungle and then suddenly come up on a group of buildings sitting in the middle of nowhere. But driving into this particular clearing seemed stranger than usual. although I can't say why. My convoy was made up of 12 people driving 5 Humvees. As we stopped, we all got out of the vehicles and walked in different directions. The food supply sergeant and his assistant walked towards a promising concrete slab. The fuel sergeant walked towards a group of slabs away from the food. The company supply sergeant went off towards a small building that seemed to have a partially collapsed roof, and the platoon sergeant and I walked towards the main building. It was 3 stories tall and seemed to be some sort of office building. If it wasn't infested with bats or other critters, it would make a great housing area for our troops and work area for the company. I was talking things over with my platoon sergeant as we approached the main door. As I walked into the building, I felt a shiver run down my back. The next thing that struck me was how cold it was in the building. This was an abandoned building in the middle of a jungle. It should have been sweltering in there. Just as I noticed the cold, I noticed that my platoon sergeant had not followed me in. He was standing outside the entrance giving me a weird look. I used the fact that he was still outside to walk out quickly. "What's up, Sergeant W?" I asked as I stepped out. "You didn't hear it?" he asked. "Hear what? What did you hear?" "Seriously, sir, you didn't hear it?" "I didn't hear anything." "You didn't hear that voice?" "What did you hear?" "As you were about to walk in, someone inside said, 'Don't come in French.' You really didn't hear it?" "I didn't." "It was loud and clear." "What's inside?" "It's cold," I said. We turned and began walking back to our Humvee. The weird thing is, as we walked back to our vehicle, the other groups were also walking back to theirs. We all got back in and drove off to the next potential site without saying anything. We never spoke about it, and now I wish we had. Did they all hear the same voice the platoon sergeant heard? Or did they hear or see something else? Number 8. I have a few stories to share. In Okinawa, Japan, on Camp Kinser, almost all of the ammo for all the military is stored there. They have civilians and Marines, both armed, guarding the ammo storage facility. A lot of my buddies that had to guard the ammo depot would talk about seeing a little boy, around 7 years old, running around. They describe him as shirtless and dirty with bruises all over his body. They would be patrolling the facility and see the little boy's face peeking around corners. The Japanese civilians reported seeing the boy as well. And when they would tell the story, you can just see the fear in their eyes. There was no doubt that it scared the living shit out of them. This second one isn't paranormal, but is still worth sharing in my opinion. When I was in Haklanea, Iraq, we were on patrol looking for weapon caches. There was one house in particular where after we cleared it, someone noticed a trap door under one of the bedroom floors. As they were clearing the house, they kept hearing weird moaning and the sound of chains being dragged against something. They open the trap door and they see these little rickety stairs that lead into darkness, which honestly looked like the entrance to hell. It was pitch black in there, and 3 combat-hardened Marines go in and clear the black abyss. As they are peering around a corner with their flashlights, they see a woman chained to the wall in tattered clothing and covered in feces. This woman begins screaming and totally scares the shit out of the Marines that were down there. Turns out, She was handicapped and in her mid-20s. We found out that her family had kept her down there and never let her out. We uncuffed her and had to drag her out while she kicked and screamed so that we could have our corpsman check on her. I never found out what came of her, but I do know her family was taken in by Iraqi police. My last story happened to me when I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, California. I was seeing this cute chick who worked over at a bar in Pacific Beach. Well, one night I go to pick her up and take her out for drinks. When I get there, she tells me that her neighbors are coming along as well. We go across the street to meet them. This young married couple had a 3-year-old boy and the babysitter at their house. We leave, get wasted, and get back after the bars close. We go back to their place, and the wife starts getting upset because it was late and the babysitter didn't put the kid to bed. Meanwhile, me and the husband go to the fridge to grab more beers. The babysitter is telling the mom that she had put the kid to bed on time, but the kid kept crawling out of the bed and going straight to the glass door facing the backyard. That's where the kid was when we got there, and he didn't even move when we walked in. So the mom goes to the kid and asks him what he's looking at. The kid tells her there's a little boy standing in the backyard. Apparently, this boy has red eyes with upside down plus signs inside them. The entire house went quiet. It scared everyone, and the babysitter freaked out because he had been staring out the door for so long. We peek outside with the porch light on and find nothing. There's no way that this kid could have been that descriptive using just his imagination. Upside down plus signs sounds like upside down crosses to me. No, thank you. We left shortly after, but everyone in the house was pretty uneasy. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, remember to hit that like button down below and subscribe for future videos if you haven't done so already. I would also like to give a huge thank you to all our troops, past and present. We appreciate all your sacrifices in doing what you do to keep us safe. To everybody else, if you have a story you'd like to share or a theme of stories you'd like to hear narrated, let me know in the comments below. Stay safe out there, everyone. I'll be seeing you in the next video.